this is a popularity contest, and people won't vote for you if they don't like you. So we are running a campaign now this early just to get to know people first. I want people to know me as a mom and a Michigander and somebody who wasn't always in politics. I'm somebody who likes cars. I used to be a Hot Wheels designer. I bartended my way through college. Let's build up that relationship. And I want people to tell me what they need.
Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm Jessica Tarlov. When Michigan Senator Gary Peters announced in January that he wouldn't run for re-election, it set off immediate speculation about who would run to hold the crucial Democratic seat. My guest today is Mallory McMorrow, and she's running for that spot. She's been a Michigan state senator since 2019 and has been seen by many as a fast-rising star in the Democratic Party. I'm one of those people who was obsessed with your 2022 speech, which I want to talk to you about. I'm a few years late. But Mallory McMorrow, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start big picture. Like, how's the campaign going? Your fundraising has been incredible. I'm not surprised by it, but can you talk about how it's been going so far and why you think so many folks are connecting with your campaign?
Yeah, the campaign is going really well. I outraised every other candidate in the field on both sides of the aisle. In my first quarter in, we raised $2.1 million, which is a big number in and of itself.
Yeah.
But more impressive to me is that it came from 28,000 individual donors. We got all 83 counties here in Michigan. 97% of our donations were $100 or under, with zero corporate PAC dollars. So we were making a big bet that people would like the campaign that we're running. And so far that's panning out. We are on a statewide brewery tour, which I'm super excited about. I just figured.
Because you like beer? Or
I
like,
I am very proudly the 2025 Beer Defender of the Year from the Michigan Brewers Guild, my proudest achievement. And so the brewers have been helping us plan this, and we have to bring more people into politics and into Democratic politics. And what better way than just to invite people to grab a beer and get to know me? We're not closing down any of the venues. We're not pre-vetting any of the questions. And our events are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We did 4 stops. We did 4 breweries in 4 counties in 24 hours to do our kind of trial run. And I expected, this is a November 2026 election. I expected maybe a couple tables of people would come out to each stop. We had more than 750 people that first weekend. So we've had to expand the time that we're at each brewery, and it just keeps building. So I feel really, really good about the campaign. And I think it's connecting with people because people desperately crave authenticity, number one, and somebody who sounds and looks very different. I think there's a lot of burnout on politics as usual, something that feels very stale, and it's the same kind of candidate forums, and you're in drop ceiling halls to talk about issues. My brother-in-law is a realtor, and he said this, I think, better than anybody else. You can imagine he has a lot of different types of clients. And he said, Mal, this is a popularity contest, and people won't vote for you if they don't like you. So we are running a campaign now this early just to get to know people first. I want people to know me as a mom and a Michigander and somebody who wasn't always in politics. I'm somebody who likes cars. I used to be a Hot Wheels designer. I bartended my way through college. Let's build up that relationship. And I want people to tell me what they need, what's going on in their life, so that we can build a campaign and a policy agenda that is actually responsive, instead of me dictating to people, here are my ideas and that's the only thing that I'm going to tell you. That's not what people are looking for.
It's very millennial to crowdsource your policy platform. And I like that. I'm feeling that deeply as an elder millennial myself. And something that you've been talking about that has really stuck with me and affected me as someone who is growing up in a new era vis-a-vis the American dream is that you're actually pitching this concept of a new American dream. And we had Rahm Emanuel on the podcast, and he's talking about how the American dream is dead. That's a common refrain, right? Jason Crow talks about it. A lot of Democrats are talking about it. But I haven't heard as much about this revitalized vision for it. So can you tell us about your view of what the American dream should mean and how you think you'd be able to bring it to life if you did win this coveted Senate seat?
Yeah, first of all, can we just talk about how depressing it is to hear people say the American dream is dead? Like, what are you supposed to do with that, except just bury your head in the sand and cry
and keep renting for the rest of your life,
well,
which
exactly.
is what I'm going to do.
And check out. And this is why people stop voting. You tell people that all hope is gone and they check out. I am somebody who, I graduated college in 2008, graduated from Notre Dame with a degree in industrial design. And I always wanted to be a car designer. And I had that opportunity. I built a concept car of mine live on stage at the LA Auto Show in 2007. And in normal times, that would have set me up for success. Instead, I'd probably have the worst timing of anybody wanting to be a car designer in American history. And I came out with this degree in my hand in 2008, and I was sleeping in the back of my car. I had no health insurance. The Affordable Care Act didn't exist. I had thousands of dollars in student loan debt. I applied to over 300 jobs. And the only job I could get for a while was folding clothes at Urban Outfitters for minimum wage. So I talk to a lot of people, in our generation. I felt that to my bones when you said elder millennial. It kind of hits me like a ton of bricks. But, you know, so many people say, I have done everything right and I'm still getting screwed. I played by the rules. I went to school or I got a job. I started my career. And there was this culture that came out for our generation that was hustle culture, that you had to have a job and a side gig and, set up an online course. And you basically had to work yourself to death just to dig out of the hole. So for me, this is the moment where I think we have to accept that Donald Trump is going to tear things down to the studs. He is burning through institutions. He is going to cut everything down to nothing. And my dad, who's a civil engineer, he's pretty kind of blunt about these things. And he says it's going to get a lot worse before it gets better. But that gives us an opportunity to build something new. So, what I've been telling people is look, this has been broken for a lot of people like me for far too long under multiple administrations, under multiple parties, and Donald Trump is the symptom. He's not the cause. So the new American dream is ours to write. That we're going to lay this out on our campaign in Michigan, and it should mean that if you play by the rules and you work hard, you should have access to buy not just a house, but buy the house that you want in the neighborhood that you want to live in. That you should be able to send your kids to a great school in your neighborhood, that you don't have to worry about gun violence in schools or in your neighborhood, that your kids should be able to come home safe. And we're not going to spend another generation training kids to make themselves harder to kill instead of addressing this key issue. That it should be easier to start a business if you want to start a business, especially in a state like Michigan. We should be looking for the next Ford and the next GM and the next company who's going to invent the next great thing here in Michigan and support that. And that you shouldn't have to worry about having lead tainted drinking water when you turn on the taps. It should be clean when it comes out. So government should work and work simply. And what I'm able to tell people is we've started a lot of this work here in the state legislature in Michigan. So unlike what we see in Washington, in my state legislature, when we took power for the first time in 40 years, we did the things we said we were going to do. We repealed the 1931 abortion ban. We expanded reproductive health access. We repealed the seniors' retirement tax to lift seniors into a place where they are not rationing their medication to pay their bills. We expanded the earned income tax credit. We lifted 100,000 families out of working poverty. We banned child marriage, which was still legal here in Michigan until relatively recently, passed sweeping gun violence prevention measures. I know it's a dark place. And
You hear
five of
these
my
things and you think like, no, it's not
no,
possible,
well,
but
and we
it
thought
is.
we were just removing, a ghost law off the books, and it wouldn't be controversial. Five of my Republican colleagues spoke out against repealing the ban of child marriage. So that's the moment that we're
Got to
living
look
in
at the
now.
donor base there, right?
It's yikes. I think the case to be made is Washington is fundamentally broken. And I talk to a lot of people who are rightfully livid with a Democratic Party who, for years and years and years, ran on the threat that Roe was going to fall, as just one example. And I have people asking why, when Democrats had all of the power in the federal government, did they not codify Roe before the Dobbs decision? Why are they fundraising off of it? Why are they asking me for $5? Why are they fear mongering about this? And what I'm able to lay out in this campaign is you're right. You've every right to be angry. We've shown a very different way to do things in the Michigan State Senate. And I think Washington should be a hell of a lot more like Michigan and not the other way around.
I like it. It's too cold for me, but I like it in theory that Washington would be more like Michigan. And you bring up this business as usual problem, and we have somehow morphed into the party of the status quo.
Yes.
And that is the worst place that you can be. Even if the change is bad, people are looking for change agents. And you have not been shy about coming after the leadership within the party as well, been outspoken about Chuck Schumer and that it, you know, maybe time for him to elegantly exit stage left or stage right. I don't know which is the right way to go. And you are running against a sitting congresswoman as well, Haley Stevens, who seems to be more of the establishment favorite, let's say, in this race. How has that dynamic played out for you? I assume that that kind of talk is resonating now that 60 to 70% of Democrats are basically saying burn it all down, right? Like if you want to keep getting our votes.
It really is. And I want to be very clear. I did make news when I announced this campaign saying, no, I would not support Senator Schumer for leader. And I hope that Michigan can serve as an example for Democratic leaders across the country. We now have 2 cycles in a row between Debbie Stabenow last cycle, who decided not to seek reelection. We now have Senator Alyssa Slotkin and Gary Peters this year, who decided not to seek reelection, recognizing that part of leadership is also understanding when it's time to bring up the next generation. And it's not just about age, but it is about recognizing that this is a very different political moment than the majority of the career that many of our more senior colleagues came up in politics, where you could more easily work across the aisle and where there were rules and norms and lines you didn't cross. And it is very different operating in the Trump era, where Donald Trump has completely remade the Republican Party in his image, gotten rid of anybody who doesn't bend the knee. You know, this is the state that had Congressman Peter Meyer, who is no longer in office because he voted for impeachment, right? It is really resonating that continuing to offer olive branches to people who continue to light them on fire is not acceptable. That Donald Trump really runs this presidency like it's a reality TV show. Every moment from sunup to sundown is programmed, from, social media posts to him standing on the roof of the White House to distract from the fact that the Epstein files are still not released, to the fact that half of his cabinet comes from Fox News. They know how to operate in entertainment and TV and capture attention. And that for the Democratic Party to succeed, we need new leaders who understand how to compete and win for that attention and use that attention to offer something better. So not just to be anti-Donald Trump, but to offer, a vision of the new American dream and what that looks like, because we are in this moment where I am getting the sense that there's some buyer's remorse, even for people who may have voted for Trump. So among Democrats, there is a desperate cry for something new. There are kind of those people in the middle who say, you know what, this is not what I voted for. I voted for IVF access, or I voted for him to bring my costs down. I didn't vote for, masked ICE agents to be raiding our communities and for the Epstein files not to come out, or whatever it is. And it is working. I think that in normal times it would have been a risk to go against party leadership, but there's a reason why the Democratic Party is polling significantly below Donald Trump. So Donald Trump's approval rating may be underwater, but people are not immediately filling that gap with, okay, it's time for Democrats to take over, unless we see a very new Democratic Party come forward.
Absolutely. I was excited to see the support for Brian Schatz as the new number 2. I love him, and I think
Yeah.
that he would be an
Yeah.
incredible leader of the party going
And
forward.
somebody who's willing to throw a punch, right? Like, call a spade a spade. Don't immediately say, well, we need to find bipartisan solutions. And I think that is, to your point, a Democratic Party that's so attached to institutions and process. I have never talked to a constituent who says, I really want a bipartisan solution. They say, I want a solution. I want
Right.
affordable housing. I don't care how you get there. If it's bipartisan, great. If not, like, just bring my housing costs down.
The abundance agenda goes for everybody, as Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson would tell us. You brought up Epstein, which is a culture war issue. I would say that you struck national gold, right, and for your speech in 2022 by talking about a culture war issue. You were accused of being a groomer by a Republican colleague in a fundraising email, to touch on many of the things that have already come up, that everyone is just desperate for a $5 donation and won't leave us alone. Can you talk about how to thread that needle in talking about culture war issues, but also making it practical for people's lives? Because I feel like too often when we get in the mud about these things, we lose the plot completely. And then
Totally.
we're not focused on issues like cost of living, healthcare access, which is absolutely massive, especially looking at the reconciliation bill and the millions that are going to lose their coverage. So, how did you do it? And what are the lessons for Democrats in navigating what is a very tricky time culture war wise? Because Donald Trump would love it, right? I mean, he doesn't like the Epstein stuff. He'll climb on a roof to avoid it. But it's better than us talking about the economy, cost of living, inflation, healthcare.
So I think the reason why that speech resonated was a couple of reasons. Number one, I was pissed off, and you could tell. And I got a lot of feedback from people saying, finally, somebody feels the way that I feel and isn't afraid to express it. Um, but, I thought a lot about whether or not to even respond at all. I was raised to believe that we don't give bullies attention and they'll just go away. But clearly that hasn't been the case. You had the rise of Moms for Liberty groups. You've had the rise of this MAGA style politics that really is about tearing other people down to build up power for some, as if, there's a scarcity in this country instead of recognizing we're the wealthiest country in the world and we should make sure everybody has access. But I rejected the premise of the smear. So I was smeared as a groomer, which is typically levied on the LGBTQ community, of which I am not a member. And instead of taking the bait and debating that issue, I thought a lot about why we were seeing the rise of Moms for Liberty groups and the agony of a lot of moms like me who had just come through COVID, who had felt abandoned by a system that shut down schools and childcare centers that left moms alone. I had actually gotten a call from a constituent of mine, a mom in a more conservative part of my district, who she left a really long voicemail. It was very thoughtful. And she expressed how angry and frustrated she was with her school district and the administrators. So she had joined this parents group, and she noticed that originally the group was focused on how do we improve communications between the district and the parents, but it was shifting into book bans and anti-DEI measures. And she was, beside herself in this voicemail saying, I don't hate gay kids and I don't have anything against teaching diversity in schools, but I also don't feel like I have anywhere else to go to put my voice and express my frustration. So I thought a lot about her when I decided how I was going to respond. So I was very intentional in speaking directly to people like her to say, I am a straight, white, Christian, married suburban mom who knows that hate only wins when people like me let it happen.
People who are different are not the reason that our roads are in bad shape after decades of disinvestment, or that healthcare costs are too high, or that teachers are leaving the profession. I want every child in this state to feel seen, heard, and supported, not marginalized and targeted because they are not straight, white, and Christian. We cannot let hateful people tell you otherwise, to scapegoat and deflect from the fact that they are not doing anything to fix the real issues that impact people's lives. And I know that hate will only win if people like me stand by and let it happen. So I want to be very clear right now. Call me whatever you want. I hope you brought in a few dollars. I hope it made you sleep good last night. I know who I am. I know what faith and service means and what it calls for in this moment. We will not let hate win.
To say that just because it doesn't directly affect us doesn't mean it's not our responsibility. But then at the end of the speech, I was also very intentional in saying people who are different are not the reason why your healthcare costs are too high and not the reason why teachers are leaving the profession. So I think the lesson and what I've taken is, it's not run away from the issue. I didn't stand up there and say this is a distraction, but I also threw a punch to get back to having the debate I wanted to have, which was about cost of living, which was about, the issues that impact 99% of people. And even if we want to protect the most vulnerable in our community, the way that we do that is by solving the issues that 99% of people face, because then there won't be that desire to blame somebody else. That's what Donald Trump is really good at. Like, you are not succeeding, you're not doing as well as you had hoped. It's somebody else's fault, whether it's immigrants or the LGBTQ community. He just places blame instead of solving the issues. And you pointed out, not only is he not solving the issues, we are slashing Medicaid, Medicare, the Affordable Care Act, Blue Cross, even private insurance here is going to go up 16% this year alone so that we can give another tax break to billionaires who do not need it. So that, I hope, is the message. Like, do not be afraid to step into the fight, but also don't take the bait and get lost in the mud that Republicans want you to get lost in. Talk directly to people and have a little bit of a spine. People want fighters. People want to see that somebody is fighting for them, and you need to be willing to show that.
You're running in a state that is particularly in the middle of the tariff wars, with the auto industry being there, and Trump loves to talk about Michigan and reviving the manufacturing culture and the way things used to be. Obviously, that is not going to plan. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing on the campaign trail as it relates to the trade wars, but also that kind of nostalgia for a time past?
Yeah, it's a great question. Look, in the 1980s, 5 of the top 10 metro regions in the entire country for median household income were here in Michigan. So by and large, we were one of the most prosperous states in the nation. And there is a desire to want to reclaim that prosperity, but we cannot just do the things we did in the 80s and expect the same results. This is also a state that was devastated by NATO and opening global trade in a way that really took away American manufacturing jobs. So there is a world in which a smart, nuanced trade and tariff policy can be used to bring more shifts back online. We saw this with GM's Lake Orion plant, where they announced restarting that plant to bring some manufacturing back here to Michigan. That's great. But on the same token, when Trump went and created these blanket tariffs on basically every product from every country that we use in our everyday lives, from clothes to coffee to bananas, things that we are not about to grow in Michigan anytime soon, that drives the cost for people in their everyday lives through the roof in a way that outweighs any of the job gains. The way that we're talking about this on the campaign is Trump is operating in this mindset of, let's just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks, or announce that we're going to have, 25% tariffs on Canada, our strongest ally and trading partner. By the way, if you make a wrong turn in Detroit, you are in Canada. These are our neighbors. These are people who cross the border every single day to live or work. And a vehicle can actually cross between the border of Michigan and Canada upwards of a dozen or 24 times in the process of manufacturing and assembly. So trade on its own has to be done thoughtfully. It has to be done with our allies, with our trading partners, and not by somebody angrily truthing on his social media platform to see what sticks and what has a negative reaction.
Wouldn't that be nice if someone was not angrily truthing? I'm I'm going to try to make this segue work. I don't know if it will, but you running in Michigan, you also need to have a very thoughtful, nuanced position on the issue of Israel and Gaza. So there's a huge Arab population in the state. We talked a lot about Dearborn, Michigan during the 2024 election. This is something. I'm Jewish. I know you're married to a Jew, so you're tribe adjacent at least. And I know that this is a difficult one for everyone in our party who wants to be supportive of Israel and also wants to be cognizant of the realities on the ground in Gaza. How are you managing this issue, and what do you make of the kind of sea change that we've seen in the past few weeks in terms of how people who have been ardent supporters of Israel, strong Zionists like the Richie Torreses of the world, Alyssa Slotkin as well, have been changing their tune a little bit?
Yeah, Michigan as a state, we have one of the largest Arab American and Muslim populations that have direct ties to the Middle East, alongside, and I think this is the piece that most people don't know, a very large, significant Jewish and Israeli population with direct ties to the Middle East. And I hope that we can be a state that models and shows the rest of the country, the rest of the world, that we can have diverse populations living side by side and doing so in a way where we uplift each other. The way that I've been talking about this, and unsurprisingly, this has come up at every single event we've been doing, especially over the last few weeks, as we've seen the hunger crisis, the humanitarian crisis in Gaza really take a dark turn. The way that I talk about it is we have to center the humanity of this situation. No life is worth more than another life. And I start from a place of believing fundamentally that Palestinians deserve peace and security, and Israelis deserve peace and security. And let's start there. I put out a statement, and Senator Slotkin put out a longer written statement. I think seeing that there was a breaking point in Gaza where the most immediate need is to address the humanitarian crisis, make sure that aid gets into Gaza, that babies are not starving to death, that families have a chance to survive, that we did see, particularly within the Democratic Party, a sea change. And I think that that was done still with the anchor of believing that there needs to be a strong Jewish state of Israel, that perception is reality. We've seen a lot of pressure from, around the world, moving away from, frankly, Netanyahu's policies in a way that puts Israel and Israelis at risk. So I've had a lot of conversations with people in the community, with my own husband, with people who feel direct ties to what's happening, to get back to a place of Benjamin Netanyahu is trying to tell us that what we see with our eyes is not true and is not happening. And we've been having really thoughtful, nuanced conversations at events, drawing the parallel. I've said to people that I hope our allies around the world do not wish harm on Americans just because Donald Trump is our president. And this is how I hope that we continue to have a relationship with Israelis and Israel, that this is our democratic ally, they're our partners, and that is not at odds with believing that Palestinians also deserve peace and security and safety. And starting from there, how can we move forward? So I hope that there has been a breaking point that does result in humanitarian aid being rushed into Gaza. I saw a really thoughtful piece from Yair Rosenberg in the Atlantic, arguing for potentially a change in approach from Israel of why not rush in so much aid, so much security that it becomes valueless, that Hamas cannot steal it, cannot sell it at escalated prices, and make sure that addressing that humanitarian crisis is the first thing, because that is what people are so viscerally angry about right now, on top of seeing the video that Hamas put out of hostages, emaciated as well and digging their own graves. And I think sometimes we lose the humanity in the issue and it becomes this third rail that we cannot talk about. But that's why, particularly in my state and from my own personal experience, we have to get back to recognizing these are people, and people deserve peace and security in the same way that we as Americans deserve.
I agree with that. And I liked Rosenberg's proposal as well. And we have a lot of aid that was supposed to be distributed by USAID. So maybe people would feel like that was being better used if you could bring it over to the Middle East.
Right.
Feed some starving people and make Israel look a little bit more humane in all of this. While we have been talking, we got some news that the DOJ is floating the release of the Ghislaine Maxwell tapes, her conversation with Todd Blanche from the DOJ, about 9 hours of it. She also apparently, and I would say unsurprisingly, that's my own comment, ABC saying that she told them that Trump never did anything concerning. So we're all on pardon watch at this point. What do you make of that development?
It's a really blatant attempt to skirt releasing the Epstein files. Ghislaine Maxwell and her attorney have said pretty bluntly she is looking for a pardon, or she is looking for an ease in her sentence. So knowing that that's the motivation, of course, she would go in and give this testimony to Donald Trump's personal attorney, who is now in this position at DOJ, relinquishing the president of any responsibility and wrongdoing, because that is the path to a pardon. And it's a blatant attempt to hopefully satiate some of Trump's base by releasing these interviews when that's not what the base was asking for. And I would hope that Democrats keep the pressure on. People were not looking for videotapes with Ghislaine Maxwell just from last week. They're looking for the Epstein files. What was in those binders that you trotted out in front of the White House with all of these influencers saying these are the Epstein files. What was in those? Were they empty? Was it blank? We know the reporting from the Wall Street Journal that said that Pam Bondi indicated to President Trump that he is listed in the files multiple times. And to not lose the plot on this, Donald Trump ran very openly on eliminating the deep state and being a man of the people. And there is no worse example of, frankly, covering up for the deep state than doing a look at this shiny object over here so that you ignore the meat of the issue, which is you have these files, you claim to want to release them, but now you're going to cover up for yourself and who other people, just so that there can be something put out there to give Ghislaine Maxwell, who, by the way, just directly responsible for years of abuse of young girls and women. Like, this is not pardonable. And I think for Democrats or for anybody who believes in the rule of law, we should push back on this with full force and say this is exactly the type of cover up that should concern you, that there are two systems of justice, one for the rich and powerful and one for everybody else. And it's not enough. It's a bait and switch. And we should demand full transparency on what is in those files.
Yeah. There's been victims who've said that she was actually worse than Epstein himself. Mike Johnson had a moment of clarity last weekend where he said that he thought that she deserved a life sentence, but Mike Johnson also always falls in line. So we'll see where all of that ends up. Last question. What's one thing that really makes you rage and one thing that you think we should all calm down about?
One thing that really makes me rage, that we are the only industrialized nation in the entire world without access to paid leave and affordable, accessible childcare. Infuriating. It grinds my gears when I hear Republicans and people like Elon Musk talking about the birth rate as if it is not connected to economic opportunity and access. And it is inexcusable. And something that is a big part of my campaign is solving that so that parents do not have to choose between family and their career. That should be an American ideal that we all get behind. And something we should all just let go. Sydney Sweeney, I did not know who this person was, admittedly, until like this past week. And we got to let it go and move on.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, and mostly because in a couple of hours I have to go talk about it again on Fox, and they are not letting it go at this point. I like that answer. Hopeful for both. I would paid leave and also no more Sydney Sweeney. Just let her act.
That would be great.
Very good
if
actress.
we could just move on.
Yeah.
If we could move on from a jeans ad and get to how do we have paid leave, I would be much happier.
It was a great campaign slogan. Mallory McMorrow, thank you so much for your time. It was great to have you.
Thank you.